Greetings, everyone. Mr. Hunter here, and welcome to the second part of our three-part series on the three great Renaissance masters Leonardo da Vinci, who we covered last week, Michelangelo, he'll be our subject next week, and today's subject, Raphael Sanzio da Urbino. We will refer to him simply as Raphael from this point forward. We will take a close look at his greatest work, the Stanza della Segnatura, which includes his greatest masterpiece, the School of Athens. Now, the School of Athens, seen here on the screen, and other works of art are large frescoes that are located within the walls of the Vatican, the headquarters of the Catholic Church. So, where is the Vatican? Italy? Rome? The answer to this question is neither. Now, the Vatican isn't in Rome, but it is surrounded by Rome, which is, of course, is surrounded by Italy. And unless you have serious connections inside the Vatican, you will most likely stay at a hotel or Airbnb in Rome and then take a taxi, bus, moped, or walk, or even bicycle to the Vatican. The Vatican city state, also known as the Vatican, became independent from Italy with the Lateran Treaty of 1929. The papal conclave itself is a sovereign entity of international law which maintains the city state's temporal, diplomatic, and spiritual independence with an area of 121 acres and a population of about 825. It is the smallest state in the world by both area and population. St. Peter's is the most renowned work of Renaissance architecture and the largest church in the world, and it is the heart and soul of Vatican City. Raphael was commissioned by Pope Julius II to paint and decorate the Stanza Segnatura among other rooms, which was Pope Julius II's library. The Stanza della Segnatura contains many frescoes by Raphael and his assistants, including the School of Athens. Here is a portrait of the warrior Pope Julius II by Raphael done in 1511, who also commissioned Michelangelo to do the Sistine Chapel, ceiling frescoes, and Donato Bramante a few years earlier to build a new St. Peter's Basilica, the one that was just on the screen. All three of these projects of great consequence were happening simultaneously. It was the high point of the High Renaissance. The Stanza della Signatura used to be the Pope's library and part of the papal living quarters. Imagine this room with the lower walls lined with books. Here is the Stanza della Signatura, which is Raphael's greatest accomplishment, that included four great frescoes based on the four branches of human knowledge. The first one on the upper left, the School of Athens, represents philosophy, which also included the science and mathematics at this time. Opposite of the School of Athens in the Della Signatura is based in theology, represents God, all things God and divine, called La Disputa. In the lower left-hand side, we have the fresco, the branch of knowledge known as justice, and the lower right, the branch of knowledge that is literature. Now, as we look at the School of Athens, it is framed by this beautiful archway. Underpinning this archway is a geometric meander inspired by designs found on ancient Greek pottery dating to 900 to 700 BCE. Here is an example of the geometric period pottery. You can easily make the connection from the geometric design, the meander on the pottery, how it may have inspired Raphael to use it in the framing of his great masterpiece. The School of Athens' visual power emanates from the figures in the middle of the composition, Plato and Aristotle. Plato, who's known for being interested in the ethereal, the theoretical, that which cannot be seen, he thought that there is much more than just the physical reality of what we can see, touch, smell, hear, and taste. Aristotle, on the other hand, is more interested in the physical, the actual world that can be observed. So, as Plato is known for being interested in the ethereal and the theoretical, we see this emphasized in his symbolic and the gesture of his right hand pointing to the sky, to the ideal forms. Aristotle, on the other hand, with his gesture of the right hand outstretched, palm face down, to emphasize physical, down here on earth. Other ways to distinguish the two great philosophers: Plato is older, was in fact Aristotle's teacher, and is holding his book, the Timaeus. Raphael was inspired by Da Vinci's work to the extent that he paid tribute to Da Vinci by painting Plato in Da Vinci's likeness using Da Vinci's self portrait, the drawing we saw in last week's presentation. His interest in the ethereal, the theoretical, are symbolized also in the color of his clothing, which is colored red and purple to signify the air and fire, which were both perceived as weightless. Aristotle, younger, holding one of his books, the Ethics, and his interest in that which is physical, that which is observable, is further emphasized in the color of his clothes, being blue and brown, reminiscent of water and earth, that which is affected by gravity. Plato's side of the painting includes philosophers concerned with issues of the ideal, while Aristotle's side is more interested in the practical application of thought. The painting is thus organized with a split right down the middle. Now let's take Euclid as a prime example of this ideal. Euclid, who we associate with geometry, and is actually drawing a geometric diagram for his audience of students, is interested in precise measurement, the application of math to the world in practical ways through engineering and architecture. In fact, the model for Euclid was Raphael's friend and one of the great architects of the High Renaissance, Donato Bramante. You can see that Bramante's influence on this fresco does not stop with his likeness portraying the great mathematician Euclid, but Raphael also used Bramante's architectural design ideas to create the setting for the School of Athens to be in. And here we see Bramante's design for the floor plan of St. Peter's. And we also see a draft of his version of the Great Dome. Today's St. Peter's, we see these effects with a strong assist from Michelangelo, who took over for Bramante, where we see the coffered barrel vaults of the ceiling leading to the open dome down in the center, also the pilasters jutting out from the walls on either side. And we see in the School of Athens these same coffered barrel vaults leading to the open dome, leading out to the open sky, these pilasters jutting out from the corners of the wall. We also see the niches on either side of the central vaults, figurative sculptures in the classical style. On the left, there is Apollo, the god of the sun, music, and poetry, a perfect fit for all things ethereal and Platonic. The more grounded side, that is Aristotle and his followers, stands Athena, the god of war and wisdom, symbolizing man's more practical nature. Euclid has his equally important counterpart on the Platonic side of the gathering, the great Pythagoras. Pythagoras holds court with his audience as he shares his discoveries of laws of harmony and music in mathematics. Or maybe he's just assigning some algebra homework that focus on the solving for C using a right triangle and solving for the hypotenuse given that a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Ha! Also on Plato's side of the fresco is the Socrates group, who we find in conversation with his students, punching holes in their arguments, demonstrating to them how to think and communicate more precisely. As we move away from the left side to the right, we see the astronomers group. And the astronomers are an ancient group of scientists interested in the physical universe. This group of figures also includes a portrait of the artist, Raphael, taking his place among the great minds focused on the stars and planets beyond our own world. This is an important distinction, as until the Renaissance, artists were considered and looked upon as just artisans and craftsmen. Here is Raphael's proof, quite literally, that it takes a great artist to visualize and synthesize all of the other aspects of human thought. Now we move to the singular figures. The first one on the right, on the Aristotle side of the aisle, is Diogenes, one of the two solitary figures that we find. He was perhaps the most famous homeless man in ancient history. Diogenes was a cynic, a philosopher who was skeptical of all philosophies. Raphael renders Diogenes as barefoot and half naked. In relation to the king next to him, he displays indifference, proving that he is unmoved by status, wealth, or royal connections. In fact, he objects to Alexander, whose shadow is blocking the sunlight that he was reading by. Raphael used the image of Michelangelo as a model for the brooding, solitary figure that was the philosopher Heraclitus, who sits in one of the most prominent spots in the whole composition. You will be learning how to draw using 1 and 2 point linear perspective later in the semester, but you get a solid preview in the School of Athens. Raphael masterfully uses 1 point perspective for the whole composition, except for the chunk of marble that Heraclitus leans on to use for his writing table, which uses 2 point perspective. Raphael sets examples all over this composition of the classical ideal of the sharing of ideas and knowledge. Knowledge freely shared can be, in some people's eyes, a very dangerous thing, but not in this work or this particular time. Thank you.